Why were these massive machines engineered to function as tanks on wheels? Why were these massive machines engineered with such extreme durability and off-road capability? It only looks obvious that they were intended for simple logistics during the 20th century, but in reality, these mechanical beasts were designed as mobile fortresses capable of conquering the harshest terrains on Earth, while fundamentally shaping the tactical outcomes of global conflicts. One can notice how collectors now fiercely seek out these rolling legends as prized historical artifacts. Nations race to develop specialized transport during periods of territorial expansion and intense global warfare. Powerful engines and sophisticated all-wheel drive systems were integrated into chassis built to withstand direct combat conditions. It gets more complex further on. Modern enthusiasts categorize these vehicles not merely as transport, but as true military legends that have survived the ultimate test of time. Everything only gets more complicated as the rarity of these machines increases their market value among specialists. The heavy equipment gradually transitions from the battlefield to private collections, where the most iconic specimens command staggering prices. One can notice how the sheer presence of these vehicles, forged in steel and military innovation, still commands absolute respect. It is visible how a single rare American model became the subject of a high-value transaction that highlights its legendary status. The process is only gaining momentum as the search for the top 10 rarest vintage military trucks continues across the globe. Thus, these pieces of mechanical history reach a state where they are preserved as monumental achievements of engineering. 9 tons of steel and mechanical precision define the legacy of the AEC Matador 4x4. Why did this specific machine command such absolute respect across decades of military service? While other transport vehicles struggled with the weight of heavy artillery, the Matador was engineered by the Associated Equipment Company in the late 1930s specifically to anchor the British war effort. It was not merely a transport vehicle, but a specialized tool for hauling massive field pieces through the most unforgiving environments of the Second World War. One can notice how the short, tall cab sits high above the axle, providing the driver with a commanding view of the terrain ahead. This distinctive silhouette, featuring a split-flat windshield and expansive front fenders, became a common sight across the battlefields of North Africa and Western Europe. But this is just the beginning. The heart of the machine consisted of a 6-cylinder gasoline engine with a displacement of 7.6 liters. It produced approximately 95 horsepower, a figure that only looks modest by modern standards. In reality, the engine was tuned for smooth, low-end torque, allowing the truck to maintain steady momentum while towing 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns or 5.5-inch field artillery. It is visible how the chassis remains stable even when the full weight of the weaponry pulls against the rear hitch. 5 forward gears and a dedicated low-range gearbox provided the necessary mechanical advantage for extreme pulling power. The full-time 4x4 drive system ensured that the wheels never lost traction on muddy or uneven ground, allowing the vehicle to reach a top speed of 40 miles per hour on improved roads. Everything only gets more complicated when considering the load factors. Depending on the specific configuration and the ammunition loadout on the flatbed, the Matador weighed between 7 and 8 tons. Rugged leaf spring suspension absorbed the shocks of shell-cratered paths without compromising the structural integrity of the frame. One can notice the heavy metal components of the undercarriage working in unison as the truck traverses deep ruts. The process of moving heavy batteries was often punctuated by the deep metallic growl of the exhaust, a sound that became synonymous with the arrival of British reinforcements. But the story of the Matador did not end with the cessation of hostilities. Post-war reality saw these machines converted into civilian log trucks, heavy cranes, and even specialized camper vans. It seems simple to repurpose such a durable frame, but this widespread commercial use led to the destruction of many original military specifications. Transition to the next level of value. Because so few survived in their primary combat configuration, authentic examples bearing original wartime markings and hardware have become prized rarities. One fully restored original specimen recently reached a staggering price of nearly £70,000 at a United Kingdom military auction. This high valuation reflects the scarcity of a truck that once halted enemy armor advances across multiple continents. The equipment gradually transitions from a frontline workhorse to a historical monument, preserved by collectors who value every original bolt and paint stroke. The Matador remains a testament to mid-century engineering, having proven its worth from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Europe. From here, the narrative of legendary logistics moves from British soil to a United States-built truck that achieved its greatest fame in the freezing wilderness of the Soviet Union. 197,678 units. That is the staggering number of Studebaker US6 military trucks produced between 1941 and 1945. The Studebaker Corporation engineered this machine to be one of the most critical logistical pillars of the Second World War. Why did this American vehicle gain its primary historical significance outside of the United States military? The answer lies in the strategic logistics of the Lend-Lease program, which diverted the vast majority of these trucks to the Soviet Union. One can notice the stark contrast between its origin in Indiana and its ultimate legacy on the Eastern Front. More than 200,000 units of the US6 reached the Soviet Union during the conflict. The equipment gradually disappeared after the war, as most were either destroyed in combat or repurposed for civilian construction and agriculture. This makes surviving examples in their original military configuration exceptionally rare in the modern era. Everything only gets more complicated when examining the powertrain, as restoring the original 6-cylinder Hercules JXD gasoline engine requires finding components for a 5.7-liter displacement system. It produces 94 horsepower and generates high levels of low-end torque. Is this power sufficient for a heavy military transporter? While a top speed of 45 miles per hour seems modest, it provided the necessary force to move heavy loads across destroyed roads and frozen tundra. The truck utilizes a 5-speed manual transmission coupled with a 2-speed transfer case to manage this output. Its 6x6 drivetrain allows the wheels to grip through deep snow and thick mud. At first glance, the suspension looks like a basic configuration of leaf springs on all axles, but in reality, this durable setup was engineered to withstand thousands of miles of transport with maximum cargo weight. The design remains strictly practical, featuring either wood or steel flatbeds and removable canvas covers. The process is only gaining momentum as the vehicle moves into extreme environments. Wide tires and a cab without any comfort features emphasize its role as a pure tool of war. Soviet troops eventually gave the vehicle the nickname of the American Camel. They chose this title because of the truck's ability to traverse immense distances under the most brutal environmental conditions. Hauling fuel, ammunition, and infantry became its daily routine, especially in Arctic campaigns where domestic Soviet vehicles often failed. Some units proved so resilient that they continued to operate in the remote regions of Siberia until the 1970s. The camera glides over the weathered steel of the frame, showing the scars of decades of service. Restoring a US6 today is a monumental technical challenge due to the scarcity of authentic parts. Survivors in full military specification are prized by international collectors and often command high prices at specialized auctions. The truck concludes its long service life as a symbol of mid-century industrial durability. From here, the narrative transitions to the next vehicle in the sequence. 500,000 units of the GMC CCKW 353 were manufactured by General Motors between the years 1941 and 1945. This 6x6 vehicle, which American troops nicknamed Jimmy, established itself as the primary logistical foundation for the United States military across both the European and Pacific theaters of operation. One can notice the distinctive profile of this machine during the most critical historical moments, including the D-Day landings and the extensive Italian campaign. Why is an original, fully operational Jimmy considered a rare find today, despite such massive production numbers? It seems simple to assume they would be common, but in reality, the vast majority of these trucks located outside of the United States were either scrapped for metal or heavily modified for civilian use immediately following the conclusion of the conflict. Finding a specimen with verified wartime documentation and its original technical configuration is an increasingly difficult task for modern collectors. A 6-cylinder gasoline engine with a displacement of 4.4 liters powers the vehicle, generating 104 horsepower. The power plant delivers torque in a strictly linear fashion, which allows the truck to traverse deep mud and ascend steep inclines without mechanical failure. Even when the cargo bed is loaded to its maximum capacity, the engine maintains steady revolutions. Everything only gets more complicated when analyzing the drivetrain. The truck features a 5-speed manual transmission coupled with a low-range transfer case to maximize power delivery during low-speed maneuvers. This mechanical arrangement, combined with interaxle differentials, ensures that the 6x6 system provides constant traction across all wheels simultaneously. The process of maintaining stability is further supported by heavy-duty leaf spring suspensions installed on every axle. These components allow the frame to withstand the structural stress of driving over bombed-out roads and uneven trails. It is visible how the split windshield and the narrow front grille create an instantly recognizable silhouette. The dual rear wheels provide the necessary surface area to distribute weight, while the metallic clatter of the valve train and the persistent scent of gasoline define the daily environment for thousands of soldiers. But this is just the beginning of its utility. The chassis served as more than a standard hauler, functioning as a mobile workshop, a specialized ambulance, a fuel tanker, and even a platform for rocket launchers. This modular adaptability rendered the vehicle indispensable on every Allied front. After the war concluded, many units were sold for mere dollars or donated to international rebuilding efforts. From a utilitarian tool to a high-value to a high-value historical artifact. This mechanical complexity and history only increase its standing among those dedicated to preserving industrial heritage. If the Jimmy represented the versatile right hand of the Allied logistical machine, the subsequent vehicle in the lineage was a specialized British recovery titan designed specifically to retrieve heavy artillery from the battlefield. This transition to the next level of heavy-duty engineering moved the focus toward pure recovery power. 102 horsepower is the output generated by the 6-cylinder diesel engine of the Scammell Pioneer. Why would such a modest power figure be assigned to a heavy-duty military vehicle? The engine, displacing 8 7/10 liters, was engineered specifically for torque and pulling capacity rather than top speed. This mechanical focus allowed the truck to haul 30-ton tanks across destroyed battlefields where traction was more vital than velocity. It seems simple to view the Pioneer as a basic transport, but in reality it was a specialized recovery and artillery tractor. Originally developed in the late 1920s by the British manufacturer Scammell Lorries, the vehicle began as a civilian hauler. With the start of World War II, the design underwent a rapid adaptation for military service. It quickly established a reputation as one of the most reliable recovery assets of the entire conflict. One can notice how the tall, squared-off stance and oversized fenders give the machine the appearance of a hybrid between a standard truck and an industrial tractor. But this is just the beginning. The chassis utilizes a 6x4 layout where the two rear axles receive power while the front axle handles steering. While less complex than a 6x6 system, the torque distribution proved highly effective for heavy towing. A 6-speed manual transmission equipped with a low-range system provides the driver with fine control when navigating deep mud, thick snow, or steep inclines. The equipment gradually overcomes obstacles that would immobilize lighter transport vehicles. Everything only gets more complicated when the truck is under full load. 26,000 pounds is the total weight of this steel giant. The leaf spring suspension on all 3 axles was manufactured to withstand extreme vertical loads and the brutal punishment of unpaved terrain. It is visible how the long hood vibrates as the deep diesel rumble of the engine begins. When the heavy clutch engages under a significant load, a distinct squeal echoes across the site, creating an unmistakable battlefield sound. The process is only gaining momentum as the truck moves toward its objective. The Pioneer performed a wide variety of roles, including the recovery of damaged tanks and the hauling of long-range artillery pieces. It was frequently seen transporting bridging equipment and heavy engineering tools across broken ground. After the conclusion of the war, many units were repurposed for civilian industries such as logging, mining, and construction. This was particularly common in former British colonies where rugged machinery was in high demand. Transition to the next level. At first glance, these trucks might seem common in the vintage market, but in reality, intact military models are exceptionally rare. Units that still possess the original rear winch system and factory bodywork are sought after by collectors worldwide. One can notice the high value placed on these machines at specialized auctions. For example, a fully restored and operational Scammell Pioneer was sold at a military auction in Scotland for over £90,000. This price serves as technical proof of the vehicle's legendary status among historical military hardware. The brute strength of this British icon set the standard for recovery operations during the war years. Now, the narrative shifts toward an American counterpart that became a symbol of heavy-duty transport on the battlefield. The Diamond T980 and 981 represent the next evolution in high-capacity hauling. These machines followed a similar philosophy of durability and extreme power. The transition to this American heavy lifter marks the next phase of the journey. 185 horsepower was the output generated by the massive engine of the Diamond T980. Why would a vehicle designed to transport 40-ton tanks possess a horsepower figure lower than some modern passenger cars? While the number seems modest, the true capability lay in the immense torque of the 14.7-liter Hercules diesel inline-6 engine. This mechanical force allowed the truck to drag armored vehicles across broken terrain where speed was irrelevant. Between the years 1941 and 1950, 1945, the Diamond T Company manufactured these machines as the primary heavy movers for the United States military. It only looks obvious to call it a truck, but in reality, its role as a dedicated tank transporter earned it the technical designation of tractor truck. But this is just the beginning. The 6x4 drivetrain delivered power to both rear axles, ensuring that the wheels maintained a firm grip on unstable soil. One can notice how the oversized fenders and dual rear wheels provide a wide, stable footprint for the chassis. A 10-speed manual transmission, which included a specialized dual-range setup, provided the necessary low-end grunt for extreme towing operations. The process is only gaining momentum as the vehicle moves at its maximum speed of 28 miles per hour. This velocity was sufficient for moving the immovable loads of the European and Pacific theaters of war. The diesel engine produced a deep, slow growl that physically resembled the acoustic profile of the tanks it was tasked to carry. It is visible how the reinforced leaf spring suspension remains compressed under the weight of a Sherman tank, yet it maintains total structural integrity. Because the vehicle itself weighed over 29,000 pounds even without a cargo load, it possessed a natural stability that prevented tipping during heavy maneuvers. The heavy-duty metal cab and high, wide hood gave the machine an imposing profile on military logistics routes. Everything only gets more complicated when considering its post-war history. Modified versions of the Diamond T remained in active service through the 1960s, transitioning into civilian heavy transport roles after their military tenure ended. At first glance, these trucks appeared indestructible, but in reality, the vast majority were dismantled or scavenged for parts after the conflict concluded. Today, an operational unit in its original 1940s configuration is an extreme rarity. Historical accuracy is the primary driver of value at modern collector auctions. A fully restored example, complete with its original military trailer, recently appeared at a California auction and became a focal point for technical publications. Some of these surviving models now command prices exceeding $120,000. The equipment gradually moves from the battlefield to the private collection, where its engineering is preserved. The truck remains a testament to mid-century industrial durability and specialized mechanical design. From here, the legacy of the heavy transporter transitioned into a quiet stage of historical preservation. 7.5 tons is the official load rating of the Mack NO 6x6, a vehicle so overbuilt that few individuals outside of the military have ever had the opportunity to operate one. When considering an intimidating industrial presence, very few historical trucks come close to the physical stature of this machine. Produced by the iconic Mack trucks between the years 1940 and 1945, the NO model was engineered for one specific heavy-duty mission. Its purpose was to haul the heaviest artillery pieces within the United States arsenal. One can notice how its brute strength and rugged construction allowed it to function as a primary warhorse behind the front lines, and in the modern era, it has transitioned into a true collector's gem. Why was such massive displacement required for a single truck? It seems simple to move cargo on flat ground, but hauling artillery through combat zones demands extraordinary mechanical force. A standard engine would stall under the weight of a 24-ton cannon, yet the Mack NO was designed to maintain momentum regardless of the incline or the depth of the mud. Under the long, high-sitting hood of the vehicle sat a massive 6-cylinder gasoline engine. This was Mack's own EY model, boasting a displacement of 707 cubic inches, which is approximately 11.6 liters. The engine generated roughly 170 horsepower, but its true power lay in the immense torque produced at low revolutions per minute. This specific output was tailor-made to pull 155mm howitzers, 240mm cannons, and even dismantled railguns. It is visible how the equipment gradually moves heavy loads at a top speed of 34 miles per hour. While this speed seems low, it was more than adequate for heavy hauling roles where stability was more critical than velocity. The truck featured a 5-speed manual gearbox paired with a 2-speed transfer case. This configuration provided full-time 6x6 drive, ensuring outstanding traction across all 3 axles. The process is only gaining momentum as the vehicle navigates difficult environments. It excelled in deep mud, steep inclines, and terrain littered with shell craters. The leaf spring suspension was engineered for heavy-duty performance across the entire chassis, built to carry absurd loads while maintaining precise driver control. At first glance, the Mack NO resembles a rolling bunker rather than a transport vehicle. It features a vertical grille, a narrow but tall cab, and massive military-grade tires that elevate the frame high off the ground. Even when completely empty, the truck weighed close to 20,000 pounds, providing an unstoppable physical presence. performance. The engine growled deeply during operation, and the distinct smell of gasoline and grease practically defined its mechanical identity. The camera glides along the heavy steel frame that allowed it to operate almost exclusively in heavy artillery transport missions. It often worked behind the front lines where heavy guns needed to be repositioned under the cover of darkness. Everything only gets more complicated when the truck served as a recovery platform. It was frequently used for pulling stuck or broken down vehicles out of the mire using its integrated winch systems. Today, the Mack NO is considered extremely rare, particularly within the United States. Many of these units were scrapped or stripped for parts in the post-war period. It gets more complex further on, as surviving examples with original steel bodies and factory powertrains are incredibly hard to find. One fully restored model, complete with its original military trailer and matching serial numbers, was sold for over $95,000 at a military vehicle auction in Nevada. The buyer was a private collector with a specialized interest in World War II artillery haulers. Transition to the next level. If this American beast was impressive, the following vehicle is even rarer and stronger, featuring engineering that defied the limits of its time. 110,000 euros is the price a collector recently paid at a Polish auction for a single fully operational unit of this military machine. Why would buyers from Germany, Norway, and even Canada compete so fiercely for a vehicle manufactured decades ago? The reason lies in the unique engineering of the Tatra 813 Kolos 8x8, a truck that entered production in 1967 under the Czechoslovakian brand Tatra. This vehicle was not merely a transport tool, but was engineered to serve as the structural backbone for the most critical heavy operations across the Warsaw Pact. The equipment gradually moves across the most difficult landscapes on the planet using a 17.6-liter air-cooled diesel 12-cylinder engine. One can notice the sheer scale of this power plant, which produces 270 horsepower and immense torque levels. Such mechanical output was specifically calibrated for transporting massive loads over ice, mountain ranges, and deep desert sands. But this is just the beginning. The central backbone chassis represents the true technical genius of the design. It only looks obvious to build a heavy frame, but in reality, this signature Tatra architecture provides both extreme rigidity and necessary torsional flexibility. This allows the heavy frame to flex over uneven terrain without suffering structural failure or permanent deformation. The process of managing power is handled by a manual transmission featuring 20 gears. It seems simple to shift, but the system utilizes 10 standard gears, each equipped with a high and low range controlled via dual levers. Such a configuration allows the truck to switch between slow, controlled crawling and steady cruising over vast distances. Everything only gets more complicated when considering the full-time 8x8 drivetrain. Independent suspension is installed on all 4 axles, utilizing a combination of torsion bars and swing arms. At first glance, this setup appears standard by modern metrics, but in the 1960s, it was a radically advanced solution for heavy machinery. The camera glides along the undercarriage where the high ground clearance and massive tires define the boxy military aesthetic of what many describe as a fortress on wheels. Empty, the vehicle weighs approximately 29,000 pounds. Yet, its structural integrity allows it to carry over 55,000 pounds of cargo, depending on the specific military configuration. It is visible how the elevated cab sits high above the ground, designed to house crews operating Scud missile launchers, bridge-laying systems, and heavy radar stations. The process is only gaining momentum as these units were deployed from the Carpathians to the frozen reaches of Siberia. Restoring a decommissioned Kolos in the modern era has become a logistical and technical nightmare for enthusiasts. Original components are increasingly scarce, and the mechanical complexity of the 18-liter air-cooled engine requires expertise that is rapidly fading. The low, growling tone of the 12 cylinders remains a hallmark of its presence, capable of rattling windows from a distance. The transition to the next level of heavy transport history begins here. If this machine served as a mobile fortress, the subsequent vehicle in the lineage functioned as a rolling battering ram forged in the heart of the Soviet Union. The material legacy of the Cold War continues through these surviving mechanical giants. 14 9/10 liters of displacement define the immense power source of the Kraz 255 B6x6. Why did the Soviet military prioritize such extreme engine volume over modern efficiency? One can notice the massive piston strokes required to generate 240 horsepower alongside a vast amount of low-end torque. But this was just the beginning. This heavy hauler, manufactured by the Kremenchug automobile plant starting in 1965, was engineered for absolute indestructibility rather than refined performance. Engineers at CRAZ constructed the vehicle around a massive steel frame designed to withstand the harshest environments on the planet. It is visible how the leaf spring suspension and reinforced shock absorbers allow the chassis to absorb relentless abuse from uneven terrain. The drivetrain functions through a 5-speed manual gearbox paired with a 2-speed auxiliary transmission. This configuration provides the operator with 10 distinct gear combinations to navigate through deep mud, thick snow, or across rivers. At first glance, the mechanical complexity seems daunting, but in reality, it ensures the truck remains mobile when standard logistics fail. 12 tons of cargo can be transported across the most unforgiving landscapes thanks to the full-time 6x6 drive system. Locking differentials are integrated across every axle to prevent traction loss in soft soil. The equipment gradually overcomes obstacles that would stop lighter vehicles, utilizing enormous specialized off-road tires. The process is only gaining momentum. While its top speed is limited to approximately 43 miles per hour, velocity was never the primary objective for Soviet designers. Survivability remains the core principle of this engineering philosophy. One can notice the unmistakable silhouette, characterized by a tall cabin, split windshields, and deep wheel wells carved into massive fenders. The truck weighs over 24,000 pounds when empty. Once fully loaded, the total mass exceeds 44,000 pounds of raw metal and cargo. It gets more complex further on. The rattling sound of the Yam's 238 V8 diesel engine often signals the truck's approach long before the vehicle itself emerges from the frozen tundra or desert dust. Military campaigns from the Siberian forest to the arid regions of Central Asia relied on this machine for decades. Export models reached various nations including Cuba, Vietnam, Syria, and Angola during the Cold War era. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union led to the abandonment or dismantling of a significant portion of the fleet. Restoring a fully original unit with an intact drivetrain and bodywork is now considered a nearly impossible task for modern technicians. Transition to the next level. $150,000 was the valuation of a pristine restored unit at a 22 military expo in Germany. This high price reflects the skyrocketing demand among Western collectors for authentic Soviet-era engineering. It only looks obvious that rarity drives value, but in reality, the mechanical integrity of a preserved CRAZ is what attracts investors. The process concludes this phase, moving from the rugged haulers of the past toward the specialized titans of the nuclear age. 8 wheels and a 4-axle drive system define the heavy-duty silhouette of the MAN 8x8, a machine engineered at the peak of the Cold War. The engineering firm Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg developed this vehicle to meet the rigorous demands of a military modernization program initiated in the late 1970s. Why was such a specialized heavy platform truck necessary for Western forces? While standard logistics vehicles could handle paved roads, the shifting landscape of potential conflict required a machine that could traverse minefields, deep snow, and hostile terrain while maintaining high speeds. This requirement led to the birth of the Category 1 high mobility truck. One can notice the distinct angular lines of the high clearance body as the vehicle maneuvers through broken ground. But this is just the beginning. The heart of this 35,000-pound machine was the MAN D2566 diesel engine, an inline 8 configuration with a displacement of 12 liters. It produced 320 horsepower, but its true strength lay in the massive torque generated even at low revolutions per minute. This power enabled the 8x8 full-time drivetrain to haul over 20 tons of equipment across ice, sand, or mud without losing momentum. It seems simple to build a powerful truck, but in reality, balancing such weight with speed requires advanced transmission technology. An 8-speed fully automatic transmission equipped with a torque converter ensured smooth power delivery regardless of the cargo load. This allowed the massive vehicle to reach a top speed of 56 miles per hour, an exceptionally high velocity for a platform of its scale. To maintain stability during high-speed maneuvering, the heavy-duty leaf spring suspension was paired with specialized hydraulic dampers. The process of stabilization is only gaining momentum as the locking differentials on all 4 axles engage to prevent wheel slip. Functionality dictated every aspect of the design, from the bullet-resistant cab to the field-serviceable mechanical components. The interior provided seating for 4 troops and could be outfitted with specialized protection against nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. On the rear platform, the versatility of the design became evident. One can notice how the chassis accommodated diverse modules ranging from mobile radar units and missile systems to standard cargo beds. It gets more complex further on as these vehicles moved from the testing grounds to active duty. NATO NATO forces deployed the Category 1 across Europe for large-scale military drills and later into active operations in the Balkans during the 1990s. Beyond Germany, small quantities were exported to the military forces of Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Today, locating a complete and original military specification unit outside of its home country is nearly impossible. Many of these machines were either scrapped at the end of their service life or stripped and converted for civilian industrial use. The rarity of surviving units has created a highly competitive market among specialized collectors. In Norway, a meticulously restored Category 1 8x8 featuring its original military paint and fully functional systems reached a price exceeding $180,000 at a private auction. The buyer intended to utilize the vehicle's extreme mobility for expeditions deep into northern ice fields. Transition to the next level of heavy machinery brings even greater scale. $150,000 was the price one American collector paid just to extract a single vehicle from a former Soviet base. This investment highlights the extreme nature of the final machine in this series, which exists in a league of its own regarding size and rarity. It is the MAZ 5378x8, a colossal remnant of Eastern Bloc engineering. Thus ends the detailed overview of the German high-mobility heavy-load platform. 8 wheels and an 8x8 drive system define the presence of the MAZ 537 on the horizon. Why did even heavy main battle tanks have to give way to this specific machine during the Cold War? One might assume it was merely another heavy truck, but in reality it was a specialized mega machine designed to carry the very backbone of Soviet military strategy across the most inhospitable landscapes on Earth. This massive vehicle first emerged in 1959 from the lines of the Minsk automobile plant known as MAZ, before production later expanded to the KZKT plant located in Kurgan. The MAZ 537 was engineered to transport ballistic missiles, mobile nuclear platforms, and armored divisions. At the center of this steel beast sat a D12A 525A V12 diesel engine. This power plant featured an astronomical displacement of 38.8 liters, which translates to almost 2,400 cubic inches. It produced 525 horsepower and a level of torque capable of moving the Earth itself. The process is only gaining momentum as the mechanical heart drives the machine forward. One can notice how the truck tows over 50 tons of dead weight across frozen Siberian rivers or shifting sand dunes without a single flinch in its performance. While the top speed reached approximately 34 miles per hour, the vehicle maintained surprising control even when subjected to extreme high loads. The transmission consisted of a hydromechanical automatic system featuring 4 forward and 2 reverse gears. These components were specifically built to ensure smooth shifting while operating under the immense pressure of a battlefield or the weight of a 70-ton tank. The full-time 8x8 drive system utilized locking differentials on every single one of its 4 axles. It is visible how the driver manages the terrain from inside the cab, utilizing a cutting-edge system to adjust tire pressure on the fly. This allowed the vehicle to adapt its footprint to mud or sand instantly. The suspension relied on reinforced leaf springs that provided both the necessary load capacity and the flexibility required for off-road navigation. But this is just the beginning of its technical complexity. From an external perspective, the MAZ 537 resembled a rolling command center more than a standard transport truck. The chassis measured over 30 feet in length and stood nearly 10 feet tall, with an unloaded weight reaching close to 50,000 pounds. The forward-positioned cabin provided seating for 4 crew members and frequently incorporated specialized radiation shielding for nuclear transport missions. One can observe the military-grade instrumentation lining the dashboard, designed to function in the harshest environments imaginable. The deep growl of the V12 engine was so intense that it was felt physically in the chest of anyone nearby. Throughout the Cold War, these machines served across the entire Eastern Bloc, hauling T-72 and T-80 tanks along with massive bridging gear. They operated effectively in temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit in the Siberian tundra and survived the arid deserts of Central Asia. The equipment gradually proved its reliability by almost never breaking down in muddy swamps, cementing its role as a cornerstone of Soviet mobility doctrine. Everything only gets more complicated after the collapse of the Soviet Union. A few units eventually trickled into the hands of private collectors, but the process of restoring such a machine is a logistical nightmare. Spare parts remain exceptionally rare, and much of the technical knowledge is still locked away in old military manuals. Furthermore, the legal transportation of a 25-ton vehicle is an expensive and highly regulated undertaking. It gets more complex further on when considering the market value of these relics. In 21, a fully restored Maz 537, complete with its matching military trailer and original documentation, was sold at a private German auction for over 100,000 euros. One particularly unique case involved an American collector who reportedly spent more than $150,000 to acquire, import, and legalize a single unit in the United States. This price tag caused a significant stir within global military vehicle circles. The machine remains a legendary relic of the nuclear age and a superweapon on wheels. The material legacy of this era concludes its journey here, preserved as a testament to extreme engineering. 100 years of industrial evolution produced the most legendary military trucks ever built for global conflict. Why are these mechanical giants considered icons of engineering rather than just simple machines? To the untrained eye, they are merely heavy transport, but in reality, their designs were forged under the pressure of war and tested in the most extreme environmental conditions on the planet. These vehicles served as the backbone for battlefield recovery operations and the high-stakes transport of nuclear components across vast territories. Preservation efforts ensure these 20th century giants remain functional today. Collectors around the globe meticulously restore and revere these units to maintain their historical integrity. One can notice how the heavy steel frames and reinforced axles remain intact despite decades of exposure. The machinery functioned in the deep snowfields of the Arctic and the dense, humid jungles of tropical regions alike. Such engineering feats did more than just survive global conflicts. They physically defined the logistical capabilities of the era. The process of maintaining these machines is only gaining momentum as more units are recovered from remote locations. It only looks obvious that such trucks are relics of the past, but in reality, they represent the peak of Cold War engineering. Decisions on which specific model represents the absolute pinnacle of this era depend on whether one prioritizes sheer horsepower or mechanical durability. Whether a vehicle was designed for the wilderness or for survival in war, the technical specifications reflect a unique period of industrial history. Every week, the exploration of the toughest and rarest vehicles continues through detailed documentation. Each mechanical legend on wheels offers a different perspective on how heavy off-road machines were adapted for the most demanding tasks imaginable. The transformation of raw iron into these awe-inspiring structures is a testament to the industrial power of the previous century. Thus, the study of these military legends reaches a natural pause, leaving the technical history of these machines ready for further analysis.